right. Good morning. Welcome to Coffee and Cargo. Hope everyone's having a good day so far. We have quite a bit of topics today, so we'll go right into it. My name's Rachel. I work with the marketing team here at Interlog. We have Justin Engelmeyer, who's our VP, and Ben Schwingle, who's our International Operations Director. So the two of them are going to go through quite a bit of these topics today. So to get started, we will be going through kind of what's been happening recently with some contracts. There's been quite a bit of news on this lately. So we'll touch on that and then get into technology and kind of the balance between technology, visibility, and qualified solutions, how to put all three of those together to make sure you're getting the best options out there. And then give an update on what's happening with the blank sailings in the next few weeks and kind of a good idea of what's happening with volume the last few years. So we'll go through all that and then end with some market updates. So if you guys have any questions while you're watching here today, we do have a Q&A that we will try to hit as many questions at the end. So you should see at the bottom of your screen, get some questions in there and we'll answer them in the webinar, or otherwise we'll reach out to you afterwards. So Ben, Justin, I'll let you guys take it from here.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. So the main thing right now is it's contract season and it's kind of doing goofy thing with the rates all over. The spot market rates are trying to bounce around and figure out where they're going to land as these guys are signing contracts with the BCOs. And a lot of interesting things are coming up right now. I think a lot of BCOs are trying to figure out exactly what they should do because of the pandemic. The whole contract thing has been changed a little bit. You have people filing complaints with the FMC because they had to pay a tremendous amount of extra money because they were forced during the pandemic to go into the spot market versus the contract. So, and I think the largest one, at least that I know of, is Bed Bath & Beyond. They're saying that they paid more than $32 million because they were forced to go into the spot market versus the contracts that they had signed with these people. And so a lot of these BCOs are wondering, well, why would I go into this contract again? You know, we saw what happens as soon as the volumes start picking up. They just kick us to the curb anyways. And so they're working with the FMC, and who knows if the FMC even has the weight to pull and to enforce these guys to actually give them the space that they say that they're going to give them. And so it's really kind of an interesting debate. We've heard of customers doing everything where they're going to go 50% of their volume is going to go through contracts with 5 different carriers. So they have 10% with five carriers and 50% in the spot market. And that does a few different things. One is they don't have all their eggs in one basket, but also at the same point right now, we have all these blank sailings. And so if you have a contract and you have a contract with just one carrier, and then they have a blank sailing next week, well, you're going to get bumped. You don't have another option. And so some of these guys are trying to put, they're trying to leverage it so they have more options. So they have multiple contracts with different carriers, and then they have 50% of their freight going on the spot market. And a lot of these guys right now are even signing contracts where the rates are a little bit higher than the spot market currently is. But they're doing that because they think that these rates are at least generally going to be more stable. And so again, it's this balancing act of what they're trying to do. But they're also, some of them are even trying to reword their contracts here to make sure that they're actually going to get the space that they say they're going to get. It's just kind of a goofy time with all that. Ben, do you have further comments on that?
Some things I'd want to add, Justin, was that the mid-April GRI, well, $500 a container is where it settled at. That was the only GRI to stick. There's been two moments of GRIs. And that April 15th GRI was really to prop up the contract rates that these BCOs were signing, and the largest NVOCs that were signed direct with the carriers. And from what we've been gathering, only about 30% of the intended volume actually was signed by those carriers. This contract season usually is wrapped up by now, but we're still talking about it mid-May, and we probably will be next month too. As you said, it's goofy. They're still trying to negotiate where that line is. That makes sense. The spot market, on the other hand, remains soft. So it's unlikely to see any changes in definitive pricing contracts signed at higher levels than they are right now, in my estimation. We'll get to that later as we watch the seasonal trends graph.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that there's just a lot of uncertainty. You know, if you've been burned for a couple of years, you have that right in your memory tank right there. You know that, hey, this could happen again. And while I don't see that likely this year, just because volumes are down, you know, they're still suspect of it. And I think right now, again, a big thing is why would you sign on a large portion of your volume with one carrier and limit your options with these blank sailings? You know, you have these blank sailings all the time, and if people still need their cargo in a reasonable time, you know, that's not necessarily the best way to go. And that's where NVOs and having them as a backup, I think that's a good plan. But also, if you're going to go in and sign 80% of your stuff to different carrier or to contracts, you should think about using multiple carriers so you limit the amount of blank sailings that you could experience.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, and a lot of times when contracts are signed with an NVOCC, they have only one carrier in mind for your cargo. So it's like you're still tied to that one carrier through an NVOCC that you are under contract with.
Well, and then at that point, I'd argue that you should probably be looking into your NVOCC and challenge them as to why they would just do it with one carrier, right? Because if you look at one carrier and what they're going to offer, they can offer, it might seem reasonable, but if you're not looking at the 10 to 11 different carriers on some of those main lanes, 12 carriers, you know, you're missing out on some deals to be had within that. You know, some of them are going to be a lot closer to the actual spot market right now, whereas some aren't. And even you can even force some of those ones that are on the higher range, you know, you can call their bluff, and then they can possibly come back down a little bit here. But I think that just going after one carrier, you know, you're limiting yourself, and you could foresee you could have some issues moving forward. That's about all I'm trying to say with it. Yeah. So I know Rachel put up that poll there. She's just having you guys sit here, and we're trying to figure out how many of you work directly with the contracts or with a forwarder, how many of you working with the carriers. We'd love to hear your feedback on that. Ben, sorry for cutting you off there.
I do want to say, like, the Bed Bath & Beyond, and they're approaching FMC to challenge it. It might just be some entertaining drama. I think that if they're successful, there'll be a whole lot of other companies following and doing similar litigation. But my knowledge of FMC and their capability holding these carriers responsible, it's just going to be something entertaining to watch, and probably not much of a financial outcome for Bed Bath & Beyond.
Yeah, you know, but there are other shippers as well. It's not just Bed Bath & Beyond. They're going to get the most attention because they have the largest dollar amount. It'll be interesting to see if more people take the same suit and start pushing that as well. I think you're right. If it's just the X amount that there currently are out there, and I don't know what that number is, but to be exact, but if it's just the amount that you see right now, I don't think you're going to have much. But if more people piggyback on top of it and it gains some momentum, maybe that changes. Who knows?
Maybe there's not a final decision, but there is obviously a large attitude shift and pressure on the FMC and then onto the carriers.
Right.
The contract's honest. We'll see.
Yep, I agree.
What's the next slide, Rachel?
All right, back to the blank sailings. Ben, if you want to go over this a little bit here. So I believe the green is everything that's actually sailing, and then the gray and dark gray, those are the ones that did not follow through here. But walk us through what you guys are dealing with currently.
Right, with our agents overseas, we look ahead, and this is a good forecast visualization where you can tell that the gray and the dark gray are pending blank sailings. But if you look to the left, you'll see which ones resulted in blank sailings. So typically, you can tell we're in the middle column there. You have about 2 weeks, maybe 1 week, before you know whether or not a blank sailing is going to occur. And hopefully the viewers can see it. What we do is you need to be agile in your bookings, because you only have about a week, maybe two, to flex to the right sailing. And also on the left-hand side, you'll see a lot of carrier names that, and we keep going up about the contract rates because we're still in the contract rate season, but these are the ones that you're tied to, and this is the unpredictable nature of the blank sailings right now.
Well, and if you look back to Ben, last month during our webinar, I believe it was last month that we were talking about it. There were weeks that had 13 blank sailings, 13 out of 33 or whatever, something like that. So hopefully you're going to see more green moving forward. That'd be nice. That would alleviate a lot of pain for everyone, but it can change quickly, to your point.
Or at least consistency in certain service lanes. And then we'll get a slide later about volume and how it's going to change throughout the course of the year. But we'll see more green as the volume spikes, or if it does.
But I would also venture to say too, as that volume starts to fill up and it starts to get more and more green, that you're also, then some of those GRIs are actually going to hold through versus them falling the way they have.
Mm-hmm. One thing we haven't gotten too much this webinar, but we have in the past, is just the macroeconomics, the Federal Reserve and the interest rates and the debt ceiling and the headline news right now. And there's just not as much confidence by consumers in the United States that would propel these carriers to plan for full vessels right now, or to prop up those GRIs. That's why we plan that type of thing too.
It's a good point. That could change in a hurry as well, right?
Hmm.
All right, Rachel, for the next slide here. So this graph, this is, I find this graph pretty interesting here, or this chart pretty interesting here. If you look at the orange, that's this year, and then you look at the blue, that's 2019. The red, that's below the blue, that is your 2020 right there. And then the two lines above, those trends that just kind of hovered up top there, those were really in the height of the pandemic when you saw rates going crazy and the lack of capacity and people were just pushing to try to get everything out. So if you look at the orange here, it's showing that we are slightly above from 2019. And so when you think of that, the first thought that comes to my mind would be, well, geez, how are we moving, roughly the same that we did in 2019? We're a little bit over, we're having more, but we had all these blank sailings. How does that work? Because that seems to be contradictory. But there's answers for that. Ben, what are your thoughts there?
My answers, first two main reasons are that the schedules set over the last 2 years matched up with the demand in the purple and green. So increased number of vessels and sailings going to the United States have to be canceled to cut back down to the blue line, which is our last normal year on the graph. And that's the one I expect to follow. The other reason would be larger vessels getting into rotation, so fewer are needed. As new ships are being bought and going into service in the next few years, we can expect to see the similar type of impact. More blank sailings, similar volume.
So they're preparing for more volume to be coming in. And if that's not being met, the longer that we have that issue, you're going to continue to see more blank sailings and a little volatility within the spot market for them jostling to figure out what to do. Fair to say?
I agree. I do. I really like this chart too. I think it depicts what everyone has felt and seen over the last few years, just in one slide. You can trace it and remember the global restocking there, 2020 in June and July. And then around October.
And that just led right into it. You look above there and that leads right into the purple. And you can see where that thing went. Or 2021, I'm sorry, the green. And you can see how that restocking, it never stopped. It just kept going and going and going. And then you see the purple of 22, where it was hovering strong for the beginning half of the year, and then it scaled way down at the end. So it's very interesting. And you can see how, if you were to look at the trend, I'd say over a longer period of time, year over year, I think more would be starting off the way it has this year, and more so the way 2019 was. That's just your typical kind of range where you have a little bit of spike right before Chinese New Year, then it dies off drastically, and then it starts moving up right into peak season. Then it kind of shelves off at the end of the year for the holiday season once everyone already has the inventory stocked for the holidays.
Right, yep, and I believe we're gonna follow that blue line again this year, above or below just a little bit. It's interesting to me also to point out that green and purple, that was the ceiling, that was the max that we could push through our supply chain infrastructure. And even at the blue, we're not that far off, about 2%, 10%, sorry. 0.2 million TEUs per month from the ceiling of what we're capable of handling in that existing infrastructure.
Yeah. All right, Rachel. There we go. So here, this slide here, the balance between technology, visibility, and qualified solutions here. So this topic has come up to us in speaking with a lot of different companies. So there's companies out there that have the best technology ever, and they have the most transparency as to where your shipment currently is. And the challenge with that too is if you're the importer here, I think there's a couple of things to also keep in mind though. So yes, we should all have online tracking and tracing, and hopefully, you know, your forwarder does that for you guys. But beyond that, just because you can see it, because there's visibility to where it currently is, just remind yourself that that's not necessarily the solution. So if you're a customer that if you're a customer that you don't care when the freight shows up, as long as it gets here at some point in time, it doesn't matter. Sure, having that kind of transparency, that's about it. That's all you really need. If you're someone where your shipments can become hot at any point in time, you know, now is a time where you need different solutions. So if you're someone where if that shipment becomes hot before it ever departs, you have different options at that point in time. If you're someone where that shipment becomes more urgent in the middle of it while it's still on the ocean, you can now stop, change the bill of lading, do different things, transload, ship it somewhere out of something else. If you're someone at the very end where you need to do it, maybe you need to make sure that your drayage company is pre-pulling it the night before and delivering it at 6 a.m. the next day. So there's a lot of different options out there. And so the main thing that we're trying to stress here is don't also get confused between technology that can show you what's currently happening versus what can you actually do about the situation that you're currently in. And to this first point here of how to keep the final mile but switch the middle, even if you're a customer that you're sitting here saying, I would love to switch, but I love my broker, or I love this drayage company, or even if you like certain routings, you can piece those together and still have someone else work between the lines on those things. There's three separate parts. You have your ocean portion, you also have your brokerage portion, and you have your final mile delivery portion. And so it's important to push your forwarder to make sure that they're handling each one of those situations properly for you.
Right, and from the operations side, I tell you that we work with many importer customs brokers that are outside of these walls. And if that's someone that they have a relationship with for the last 5, 10, 15 years, and they feel really comfortable with them because maybe their product is very specific, chemicals or what have you, they need a customs broker that they trust with that specialty, they have no problem passing documents to them, getting their clearance, and making delivery. That's not abnormal. So just know that it's not always a complete package. You can talk to a forwarder about piecing it together to your advantage. And Justin, I think this would be a good time to give some love to the export customers too. It's not just final mile, but first mile. It's the same for exports. There's lots of carrier options on exports, but very broad range of transit times. So while you might have a customer that needs it in 45 days, but your manufacturing is shut down or there's delay in the readiness of your cargo, having a forwarder that can adjust to a different ocean carrier is just as important as what we've been talking about on the import side, avoiding blank sailings and finding a quicker transit time. Doesn't mean you're tied to that forwarder because you like the drayage company that they work with, but they're just maybe stubborn in finding a different carrier, for ocean carrier I'm talking about. Work with a forwarder that is agile in finding your export bookings to match the transit time needs of your customers.
Right. And I want to touch on one thing real quickly here, because I noticed some of the questions coming in about blank sailings, and if we could define that a little bit more for them. A blank sailing is essentially where you're lined up and say you have a weekly schedule. You're supposed to depart Shanghai to Long Beach once a week, or whatever your schedule normally is. And so you book it, you're supposed to be on that thing. And then all of a sudden they say, nope, we're not going to sail the vessel because the vessel is going to leave empty. It's not going to be full. And so they all of a sudden have a blank sailing. And then you get bumped, essentially. You get bumped to the next sailing. So if they don't have enough this week, now you're bumped to the next. And so you're literally, once your container is in queue and it's sitting there for that shipment, you'll get bumped to the following week. That's what we're getting at with the blank sailings. And then as far as inland rates and stuff like that, going into Chicago and how it's affected as port to port rates, yes, it's a matter of how much, what's going on with the rail capacity at that point in time. Are they dropping their rates or not? Or you are going to certainly see a decrease in the rates from the ocean carriers on that port to port side as well,
though. Yeah, that chart is just Shanghai port. It'd be too much to put all the graphics from all the ports side by side. When you would see that either some services are completely stopped, or more likely you'll see certain ports are just skipped this week and resume the next week.
Right.
I don't think anything else on that slide. Rachel, no, I don't.
We're good. All right, we'll end with some quick market updates. So the Panama Canal has been experiencing really low water levels that we haven't seen really before. So there is some strict weight limitations now to this. As you can see on the screen, we have some what those are right now. So we're kind of watching that. If you guys have any questions on it or it is impacting your shipments, please reach out. We'd be happy to have a conversation about it. And then just a quick update on the transatlantic lane. Rates are continuing to drop with certain carriers are kind of outpacing the competition. So that's kind of what we're seeing there as well. But we do send out an email tomorrow every time after the webinar to give a full clip of the market updates, put more lanes on there as well. So look out for that tomorrow afternoon. But that's about it. Justin, Ben, do you have any other comments?
Good to go here.
I mean, do you mind going back for a moment? I'd like to elaborate on the transatlantic because we haven't talked a lot about that. But we have been saying the last few months rates are trending down, and they still are, right? They're probably could drop several thousand still back to the normal range they were years ago. But what we're seeing is certain carriers like Hapag-Lloyd, for example, out of Italy, is quite a bit cheaper than the other carriers, and it's going to draw a lot of attention and overbooking on Hapag-Lloyd. But we'll watch other carriers either imitate them and drop their rates drastically too and pick up some volume, or maybe they'll kind of hold tight. But there's certain lanes where you'll find some low-cost leaders, whether it's the UK or Poland, Italy. So this is definitely a good time to do some price checking on your European imports. If those time to flex and try another forwarder in those lanes, this would be a month I'd start looking.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. So just something, next month, we will be having our webinar on June 21st. We're going to go back to our normal time, 10 a.m. Central. I know I always say it every month, but if you'd like to be on our monthly mailing list, email myself at rachel@interlogusa.com. What that means is you will be automatically added to our webinars, so you don't have to sign up each time. And I am going to put in the sign up link in the chat here. You should see shortly to sign up for next month, save your spot in advance. We also put it in our newsletters, our socials, all that as well. But thank you all for joining. If there's any additional questions based off this webinar, please reach out to us. But have a good rest of your day. Thank you, Justin and Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.